Good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. Thank you for this opportunity to provide an update on the proposed acquisition of environmentally sensitive lands in Orange County. Today we're going to cover, and I want to thank you all and commend you all for your vision and commitment to the preservation of our environmentally sensitive lands to ensure that our community is ecologically, economically, and socially resilient community. So the topics in this presentation that will be covered is a purpose statement, background, an overview of the administrative regulation proposed revisions, the evaluation process, and a proposed resolution for the establishment of a Green Place Advisory Boards, next steps, and then a summary. So today we're going to provide you an update on the proposed revisions to the administrative regulation covering acquisition of environmentally sensitive lands, the proposed process for evaluating and scoring those lands being considered for acquisition, and a proposed resolution establishing a Green Place Advisory Board. A little background on this subject. This initiative is supported by Mayor Deming's Transition Team Report, as well as the Sustainable Operations and Resiliency Action Plan, which was accepted by the board in January of this year, which includes a goal to preserve an additional 23,000 acres, which would effectively double our current inventory of environmentally sensitive lands within Orange County. As you're aware, there was a previous work session given to the board on January the 26th. During that work session, we laid out a acquisition and funding strategy to the board. The board requested an additional work session be provided to them. Later in the afternoon, the board approved a budget amendment of $7 million annually for 20 years to pay back a bond. And most recently, during the July 21-22 budget presentation, there was funding request, the total funding of $100 million for environmentally sensitive acquisition was proposed. So now I'm going to cover the proposed revisions to the Administrative Regulation 11.07.01. We did conduct an analysis of enacting an ordinance versus updating the administrative regulation. And some of the determining factors was really the purpose of an administrative regulation is to direct staff's actions, to establish procedures for internal operations, and it provides accountability and predictability for the process. Whereas an ordinance really would directly affect the public or the regulated community. And so any purchase of environmentally sensitive lands would come back to the board for your approval, and that process is outlined in Administrative Regulation 6.05.02. And this will also allow compatibility between the proposed administrative regulation revisions today. So the administrative regulation is divided into two sections, a policy statements and procedures, which outlines the duties and responsibilities, the process to nominate parcels for consideration, evaluation and selection criteria, considerations of acquisition, and the evaluation process. Part of the analysis, we looked at our surrounding neighboring counties as well as Collier County, and this table outlines that process. So we would look to the proposed Green Place Advisory Board as a third-party review, and the only other county that requires that is Collier. All counties would require the Land Acquisition Advisory Committee. It's a willing seller program only that allows us the ability to apply for grants and leverage the funding that you have so generously supported. ESL parcel priority list approval, we will be looking to the Green Place Advisory Board for new parcels. The previous Green Place Advisory Board served that function on the identified corridors that we laid out in the January work session. And all of the ELS purchase approvals are done by the Board of County Commissioners of all of the counties. So what are some of the proposed revisions and their purpose? They will add flexibility in terms of the funding sources. It will specify an evaluation process. We're proposing to provide additional evaluation criteria. It's going to modify the process for nominating the parcels. The previous process was very onerous on the public to provide all the information that was required. So we wanted to streamline that process because we recognize that what we have already identified will not help us meet the goal of doubling our environmentally sensitive lands. There's a requirement for parcel donations, and any recommendation to the board that's brought to the board for a purchase of a property will specify the criteria that that property met. And so the existing evaluation criteria within the administrative regulation is the rarity of habitat, diversity of ecosystems, plant and animal species, presence of non-imperiled and imperiled species, its contiguity to other preserved lands, its manageability, the availability of funding from other agencies and nonprofits, threats of degrading events, and protection already afforded by existing county or other regulations. So what we're proposing to add is nature-based recreation and ecotourism opportunities. Not every property will be open to the public. Some will be preservation only. But for those that where it's suitable and compatible with the natural resources, we will look to open them up for the enjoyment of the public. Properties that close the gap between publicly and privately owned ESL lands. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice. And most importantly, provide protection of our water resources. So we did compare the criteria that is already existing in our current administrative regulation against Seminole, Osceola, and Collier County. And this table outlines the criteria. For the most part, all of the ordinances provide the similar criteria with the exception of a few, like the availability of funding is not mentioned in Seminole County. I know that they do seek partnerships, threats of degrading event and protection afforded by existing regulations is not mentioned in Collier County. And where we differ from Collier County is geographic equity. We want to base our decision to protect these properties on the resources that they provide and preserve. So next I'm going to briefly go over the evaluation process. We have developed an evaluation matrix and companion guide using the current and proposed criteria in the administrative regulation. This will allow for the standardization of a scoring methodology, which provides consistency and predictability to the process. It helps to prioritize parcels for acquisition. It will also streamline that process for evaluation of new parcels. And so we've created a nomination form and also an acknowledgement and results form. And it will allow an increased points of engagement by both the proposed Green Place Advisory Board to nominate additional parcels as well as the public. Next, I'm going to go over the proposed Green Place Advisory Board. We have a draft resolution for the creation of a new board, and we coordinated that efforts with the Orange County Attorney's Office as well as Agenda Development. We did evaluate other program advisory board structures to help develop the proposed composition. The proposed composition is 7 members total. We would look to use the MMRB process. They would review the applications, and then those recommendations would be brought to the board for final approval. And so the membership would include members from recognized environmental conservation organizations, agricultural interests, academic or educational representatives, and at-large representatives. No more than 2 members per category, so one of those categories would only have 1 member selected. The terms of appointment would be 2 years terms, except for the initial term, which would allow for the staggering of successive memberships. And so what we're going to look for the Green Place Advisory Board to assist us with is evaluate and prioritize new parcels, recommend names for existing and future Green Place properties for board approval, evaluate Green Place uses, evaluate potential amenities, review the Green Place Master Plan. We have been working on that for several years now, and the purpose of that plan was we recognized that the public was not really aware of the Green Place program and all that we had to offer. So we've been working on that, ways to do that. And they would also provide input on a new web page, outreach, and educational materials. But more importantly, we're going to look to these individuals to be our ambassadors, because we can't be everywhere. And they can help us to trumpet the good things that Orange County is doing, as well as the Green Place program. So the previous Green Place Advisory Board was established in 2007. It was an 11-member committee structure. It was very agency heavy. And at the end, it was very difficult to achieve quorum for the meetings. So that membership was comprised of Florida Department of Environmental Protection, St. Johns River Water Management Districts, South Florida Water Management District, academia, the Trust for Public Lands, the Nature Conservancy, the EPD manager, and 4 at-large members. And so what they helped us with was evaluating lands for preservation, and those were laid out to you in January, recommending policies on their appropriate uses allowed on those properties. Previous boards have passed a resolution outlining what can and cannot be provided on these properties, naming existing and future Green Place properties. And this was, that advisory committee was inactivated. And prior to this one, we had 2 ad hoc committees that had a similar structure. The only difference was that the 4 members at large here went through the MMRB, the ad hoc committees. The mayor appointed those 4 at large individuals. So again, I just want to reiterate that, we value the public, and we want to develop a strategy to further engage the public into the Green Place program. We're looking to do that through our master plan. We're potentially going to be rebranding a new logo. We want to develop a web page that will provide all the information about the acquisition of environmentally sensitive lands, the land management and restoration that we're undertaking, the opportunities for the public to enjoy these properties, and we also will do that through outreach events and social media posts, brochures, and public service announcements. And so I want to thank you for your time this afternoon, but most importantly, I want to thank you for your commitment and your vision for trying to preserve our environmentally sensitive lands in Orange County. Oops, I ended it too soon. I forgot about the next steps in summary. I'm sorry. So the board approved some of the next steps. We will be bringing back to the board the amended administrative regulations, reestablishment of the Green Place Advisory Board via resolution. In September, the full program funding hopefully will be approved. Coordinate with REM to identify and negotiate acquisitions within the identified corridors, board approval of negotiated contracts for ESL lands, and expand the parcels for consideration. And we will be providing an annual progress report to the board. And so in summary, the board has approved significant funding for environmentally sensitive land acquisition. We're proposing changes to the current administrative regulation, which will help make the process for acquisition more formalized. We're proposing a new Green Place Advisory Board, which will play a vital role in assisting staff with input in the process and enhancing our visitors' experience, standardizing the process for parcel evaluation, and EPD staff is ready to work with real estate management on the identification of parcels for acquisition. Thank you for your time.
There are a few commissioners who have indicated a desire to speak on this item, and so we have very talented staff here who can respond to the questions. And we're going to start. Commissioner Wilson, I believe, you either pushed your button very early this time, but so you're up first.
I did because I was so excited. I mean, we got to talk about this, and to me, I just want to thank you for the endurance event that is Green Place. And I think that, we talked about, Mayor just spoke about his initiatives and his goals, but I mean, the birth of Green Place was like in the 1990s, and the idea back then of boards that really could see a need to put away resources and ecologically fragile spaces. I think one of the speakers earlier brought up the IPCC report yesterday about climate change and really, first of all, we all kind of get that existential crisis when we read that stuff. But then, knowing this was coming up today and understanding that we have such a great opportunity right here and now and I understand, that there's global issues, but in our own community, we have such a great opportunity. So I want to thank you so much for sticking with that, and EPD folks for working hard to push things forward. And really very excited about seeing the upland inclusion and the focus on the water resources, knowing that, voters clearly think the water is an issue and that we need to really watch it and make sure that we are good stewards. And I had a couple concerns and then a question. You sort of answered it about the makeup of the advisory board going from 11 to 7 because there was a difficulty getting quorum. And obviously, if they're representing agencies that are oftentimes not even based here, I can see a difficulty with that. Is 7 going to really provide, though, enough feedback? I mean, I know we want to get to quorum, but this looks like a very directed advisory group and very task heavy, and nobody likes being in a group project without a good group. So do you think that the 7, did that come from another model somewhere? And then I have a follow-up.
It's 7 of us, Commissioner.
Hey, look, and it took how long to get the chickens through?
It's 7 of us. It's a good number.
It's a perfect number for this commission.
Typically, functional boards, we all know if you volunteer anywhere, there's always the same people that do everything anyway. So, but a functional board really typically falls between 5 and 9.
Okay. So this comes from experience. So I definitely...
both personal and professional.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's nothing more frustrating than showing up and not having quorum. So the other concerns that I just kind of wanted to highlight while we're working through some of these things that as I talked to residents and community members that arose, one was the passive approach to acquisition, that it's really focused on donations or citizens that come forward, citizens or organizations that come forward with them. And obviously with time being what it is and the understanding that property is, the value goes nothing but up. And if you can imagine, if we had not defunded this program when we were coming out of the last recession, how we would have had, some amazing assets environmentally and otherwise across the county. But wondering about the the level of engagement that we will get to have as a county as opposed to things coming to us. Just putting it out there. So that proactive versus taking in the intake.
Well, the proactive step is the $100 million. And, but I understand, and that's why we want to look to really engage the public through not only the revitalization and of our webpage, but again, those, I can't express any further or that the Green Place Advisory Board members, whoever they are, will really be our ambassadors.
Yeah.
And we'll look to them to provide new ideas for new parcels, but also the public. I mean, since the public has become aware of that we have funding now, we have received quite a few parcels that were not originally on our list for consideration. So that's why we wanted to streamline that process for nomination so it would make it easier, but also let them know what we're going to do, acknowledge that we've received it, we're going to evaluate it, and then once the evaluation is completed, we will provide them with the results of the evaluation.
Okay, and that, I mean, I'm with you, get the, the public buy-in, understanding the investment.
I mean, Eric handed me how many applications today. He said, here you go, Beth. So I do think that it will not be such a passive thing.
Okay.
But, we had to be creative when we didn't have any funding, and we were able to acquire a lot of lands through donations.
Oh,
so,
listen, I'm very grateful for that. I just was, thinking about while we're working through this, trying to get at it as many ways as possible. So the other concern that I had just by looking at the new evaluation criteria that was added was the increased level of human interaction that comes with the ecotourism focus and the amenities or amenitizing. I think anyone that's seen, fishing line tied around a bird wing or a garbage can that's overflowed in a park knows that we can't necessarily amenitize it as a park and then call it something that we've taken off limits. And finding that balance for me is it's a concern, knowing that we maybe just need to be really super careful about how that's worded. And as of right now, looking at the criteria, it sounds like it'll be more valuable if humans can use it, which I think if, we think about the forest as our lungs and the wetland as our kidneys, it doesn't necessarily need human interaction for those things to give us a health and welfare benefit. So I'm not sure how to go forward and making sure there's a balance there.
That's why any amenity or any use that we allow on the properties are very nature-based. It's wildlife, the ability to observe wildlife, the ability to photograph wildlife, the ability to take a walk out in nature. I mean, when we put trails in, we try to put the trails in where there's already been disturbance and try to and make sure that wherever we're going to allow that human interaction on the property will not be to the detriment of the natural resources that we are trying to protect.
Yeah, that's exactly. Last one, and I promise I'll pass it off. I'm sorry. I'm very excited about this program. Looking at the criteria and the language about using FEMA maps as an evaluation resource for some of the floodplain management and use, I have concerns about Green Place being used as part of our stormwater retention issues, and we've got them all across the county. And so I just want to make sure that there's a way for us throughout, the development of this to distinguish the difference, understanding that when, we're using FEMA floodplains that we're.
Well, the beauty of preserving natural resources is we don't have to put stormwater ponds in because wetlands provide natural floodwater attenuation, but I do understand. But we do get credit for our citizens by preserving lands on their flood insurance. So that's one of the criteria that FEMA evaluates. Every county gets a score, and part of that is the amount of preserved lands. And so that will help potentially
say it
save
again,
our
loud,
citizens.
like loud for the people in the back. We get FEMA credit for what? Say it again.
For preserving our natural resources.
Because it helps protect people's property, yeah.
Right.
So I just, for those that think there's a tension there between the economic drivers or development, and it's not, we really protect people's property by preserving this. All right, thank you so much. I am very excited about this, and we'll keep hammering
Thank
through
you
it.
so much.